He is the North Carolina market leader for Personify, a talent acquisition firm that specializes in recruitment, process outsourcing, and executive search. In this role, he's responsible for strengthening internal teams through recruiting, hiring, as well as increasing the company's brand and market share in the state through business development initiatives. In the 7 years he's been with the company, he successfully launched a networking series for talent acquisition professionals. It's called Coffee for Closers. Give it up for Jason Ybarra.
Hello. How's everybody doing? Good? Heard you guys were a lively group, so let's kick this thing off. As they mentioned, my name is Jason Ybarra. I'm with Personify, and I've been in talent acquisition in some facet for the last 7 years. So when we think back over the last 3 years, and you'll see on the slide some themes that we've ran into: labor shortage, the Great Resignation, the pandemic. And what that's caused us to do as a society is to pause and realize what's important to us, what matters, where we want to work, how we want to function in our everyday life. So when we start looking at these things and evaluating them, we realize the labor shortage and what it did to the transportation industry, the healthcare industry, the food industry, the social assistance industry. It crippled them, okay? Then we look at the Great Resignation, where people are saying, hey, give me an RV and give me a destination, I'm gone for the year. The heck with this thing, I'm out of here. Or I'm over my said industry, or I'm gonna retire early. And then you throw the pandemic into it, and that caused a whole nother dynamic to it. The sickness, teaching a child how to use technology, and this is their first year in school, caring for your parents, and that you just saw the uptick in the depression percentage and the anxiety percentage, right? And then all of a sudden, you throw in technology, right? Which is what Amy covered, and all of a sudden we're trying to live in a world that's new to us, but at the tip of our fingertips, right? Before, it used to just be our cell phone that we were glued to it, and then we had access to everything. But then our workplace permanently entered our home place, our school permanently entered our home place, and that's the world we lived in for some folks for a year and a half. But the reality of it is, in other industries, they didn't stop. They didn't have a situation where they were working from home. So you mix that up, and then that's kind of where we are right now as a society, trying to figure out what do we do next. So take this with a grain of salt. It's polarizing for a reason, right? So on the left side, the pink side, we have the past, and I'll categorize it as the barefoot backwards uphill in the snow mantra. And then on the right side, we have the blue, which is the now, like, why are you barefooted? Put some shoes on and just hit the Uber button, right? Or why are you walking in the snow? And that's what we're dealing with, because all the information we're consuming it from a sense of truth and a sense of 100%, right? So the left side, we work 9 to 5. We focus on inputs. We have no voice. We rely on email. On the right side, we work anytime, anywhere, with whatever device we want, and I want to become a leader. So when you put all this together, you have a polarizing situation. So some of you have read this, and some of you are now just getting there, like, what does that mean? George Washington internet? Like, how is this connected? I'm not really sure, because it's not connected, right? But it goes back to the information that we consume. When it hits our screen, whether it's our computer, our LinkedIn newsfeed, our TikTok, I don't have a TikTok, and I don't do TikTok dances, but any of that, we consume it and we have a second to digest it. And a lot of times, we either agree or disagree with it. And this is that quote, right? Don't believe everything you read on the internet, a la George Washington. So how do we get to a point where we're adapting to the current situation that we're in, right? I think it's important for both employees and employers to identify what's important to them. As a company, identify, are you, depending on what color bracelet you're wearing today, right? Are you a work from home? Are you a hybrid? Are you in an office? And share that, communicate that with your people so they understand that, right? The lines aren't blurred, and it works both ways, employees to employers, employers to employees, so there could be a common ground in the middle there. When you promote it, communicate it through your social media, communicate it through your job posts, communicate it through your internal communication, whether it's a newsletter, and support that mission. The other part of it too is you got to become real with it. Right, that's what you have to recruit. That's what you have to retain from an employee base. The next step in that is that we look at this place of pause in our lifetime as the pandemic, and what it's done is cause us to really focus on this. But the reality of it is that our workplace is always evolving. We were just forced to stop our life, some of us, and all of a sudden the light got bigger. So what that's done is it's allowed us to focus on this, which is a good thing, right? But the reality is 10 years ago, we don't do the same work we do now. We do it differently. Generations have aged out, generations have come into the workplace, right? So the one thing to keep in mind is that you always have to accept the evolution. This isn't new to us. This isn't new to the workplace. We have computers, right? Our phone, right? There's so many things and so many milestones throughout history that we've seen this and we've accepted it. But when you start partnering in with some of those milestones that I showed earlier in the slides, it makes it feel different, right? The pandemic made it feel different. But the reality of it, we're human beings. People evolve all the time. So that is my message as far as the evolving workplace and how to recruit and how to retain your people. Thank you.
Questions for Jason? Right here.
Hopefully I'm allowed to ask a question. What do you think about job descriptions? Are they antiquated? Have they gone away? Are they different? What are they now?
Job descriptions are as good as the people who wrote them, number one. And I don't mean that like throwing shade, as the young folks say, but that's the reality of it. It depends on where it's generated from. My advice to any hiring manager that we deal with or any client, like hire the individual, right? There may be, let's say there's 10 things listed on a job description. If it's the right person, they hit 7 out of 10, guess what? You got a match, right? If it's somebody that really wants to be there and they can train up in one piece of it, you have a match. Don't be so rigid in how we function and how we think that you miss out on great opportunity with great talent.
Other questions? Over here.
Oh man, I thought I was gonna get off easy.
Considering the working remote environment nowadays, that I think a lot of people who live in big cities still expect to make big city wages. How do you think that'll play out over the coming years in terms of trying to recruit people from across the nation for remote work, and also people trying to get paid to live in a more expensive environment?
Yeah, I think when the pandemic hit and remote working became more of a normal during that time period, you saw that movement. I'm going to go find a cheaper cost of living. I'm going to move to Raleigh, North Carolina, but my wage is going to be in Sunnyvale, California, because it made sense. Like from an economic standpoint, me personally, I think you're going to see that even out just a little bit. It existed before the pandemic, right? We had people that work remote all the time, and their corporation may be in these bigger cities, so it's still there. I think we'll see more of what that plan was come back to fruition than what we saw the wave of people move into these places where cheaper cost of living existed, but getting a salary in a bigger market. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Over here.
So thinking generationally, college new hire recruits, what's their preference? Do they want to work at home? Do they want to come in the office? Do they have a preference?
So just so I make sure I understand your question, what are we seeing from a college graduate standpoint? That's you bring up an interesting point because, and I don't remember exactly time period wise, but a lot of college graduates right now really never had the full experience of college. So they are a group that I would make, and this is my opinion, you're going to see a little bit of both, right? You're going to see some that are like stuck to their guns. By gosh, I am working 100% remote. And then you're also going to see some others like, I want to be in a work environment. Exactly that. What's happening, and this is just in some of the conversations I've had, you're having college graduates want to start a friend group in the workplace, and it doesn't exist, unfortunately, because you're remote. That's right, and it goes back to what Amy had touched on earlier. I think companies are finding different ways to bring their employees back in and not break the bank in doing that. But there is a little bit of a mixture in there where you are seeing college graduates who are moving into their professional careers that are looking for that connection with people, right? They're looking for their work friends because the candidacy behind being candid about it is in college they didn't necessarily have their friend groups unless they brought them to college with them because the way their structure was set up during that time period because of the pandemic.
Other questions? Go in the center here.
Pertaining about the interview process, since we're used before the pandemic to see in person the interviewee, how, when you conduct a remote interview, how can you perceive, for example, nonverbal cues that in a way gives an idea about the potential candidate?
I just want to make sure I understood your question. So in the interview process, from a virtual interview standpoint, how are interviewers picking up on the nonverbal cues? I don't know that answer, to be honest. I don't know if they are. There's only so much you can get from a screen standpoint. If I had to truly make a guess on it, you're going to be evaluated the same way. How are they sitting in their seat? What does their background look like? What's their lighting look like? Are they comfortable? And this sounds crazy. Is their camera on? Right? I mean, that sounds like we laugh about it, but that's the truth. Like, so when I was recruiting during the pandemic and I was prepping a candidate, you developed a checklist pretty darn quick, right? Put your cat away. I don't want your cat climbing on your desk in the middle of an interview, right? Turn your TV off behind you. But we hadn't really lived that yet. So I think for the most part, it's not 100%, right? But you start to monitor, like, how professional is this person on this screen across from me? And if there isn't anything that stands out, right? If the cat's not walking, if the music's not playing, and all that stuff, that's really all you can do. But I think, we laugh about the camera being on, but I think that's the number one. Like, is your camera on? That's not always 100%. Unfortunately, that's kind of sad to think that, but it's the truth.
Another question for Jason? Scanning the room. Oh, convenient, right here.
It's funny you bring up the camera. We have issues at my company about getting employees to turn the camera on versus not, and the invasion of privacy when you're working at home. So how do you counter that debate on should the camera be on while you work if you're in a meeting versus invasion of privacy?
You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I don't know. Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I don't know if companies have it have it right now because I think we're still trying to figure out. And it's kind of funny because before working from, and I always say this, before working from home became a thing, like I worked from home for 8 years, and it wasn't like, there wasn't all these nuances, but I think you X time the number, and then all these little things start to come up, and we never thought about it. You know, I would say like, I don't know, my opinion is like turn the camera on, like that's a part of it. We use FaceTime conversations, and I don't mean that to plug Apple or anything like that, but we use FaceTime conversations all the time. I think sometimes, you know, those types of nuances are more of a situation where people want to make a stand in one regard or not, or another.
Give it up for Jason.
Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Thank y'all.